what is your end goal for your business? Let's identify what that is. Let's not just look at like, is it an exit? Is it how much money you're making there? It's like, what does your day-to-day look like? Agency design, we're looking at what do we need to do now? What systems do we have to set up in order to, get the exact life that we want with our agency later?
Well, Mr. DuBois, thank you so much for hopping on the podcast. I have to tell you something that I have yet to tell you, which is your last name reminds me. I don't know if you remember. I think it was in the late 90s, early 2000s. There was a show called Medium. Are you familiar with this?
No.
Okay. So the person's last name was DuBois. So every time I see your last name, I immediately think back to the show Medium. So,
all right. I think there was a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie, The Quest. I believe his character's name was Chris DuBois. And so
you're famous.
Yeah. I would say they modeled it after me, but I was probably still in diapers when it came out. And so,
I mean, you can still take credit for it though.
Sure. So they knew I'd be an action movie star.
I mean, but you did kind of grow into being an action movie star between your military background, but then also the work you're doing right now. You're kind of a big deal. So,
trying to be. We'll see what happens. Yeah.
I love it. Well, Chris, I think some of the things that I've really appreciated as we've gotten to know each other a little bit more is I really like how tight your offer and positioning is. And I think it's one of those like self-evident offers. It's kind of like I was having a conversation with a guy about their video agency. One of my previous guests was a video agency owner, and he himself was a very the work that they were doing was very self-evident in their video work. And I love it when I see these folks that are helping agencies, everything that they do, they're drinking their own Kool-Aid. And I think you do that so well with your offer. And I want to talk a little bit about what it is that you do. So I know a big thing that you're working on is you do help agencies grow. So you're more on the growth side of things. So would you mind just framing up a little bit, like what is the offer that you provide to agencies?
Sure. So I don't know if this is a term. I tried Googling this and you get tons of other things, but agency design, where a lot of times agencies are, one, you're an accidental agency owner. It's probably a majority of the people I talk to. You're really good at some creative, right? And so you're like, I can make a business out of this. You start doing the things, you start building a team. Next thing you know, you're like, whoa, I have an actual business I have to run. I don't know what I'm doing. So I ran an agency. We got it up to about 3 million. I have talked to plenty of other agency owners, and there are these like roadblocks that just come up continuously. And it's like to the point where someone says, I have to restructure everything, right? And like for most agency owners where change is like the status quo, right? You're comfortable with change. Like, I'll just shift my model and do all this. But as you keep growing, it becomes a bigger deal because now you have a team that's like, hey, we don't like change, right? Like we are not comfortable with that like you are. And it just creates all of this chaos within your organization. And so through agency design, it's like, well, let's actually just model out like, what is your end goal for your business? Let's identify what that is. Let's not just look at like, is it an exit? Is it how much money you're making there? It's like, what does your day-to-day look like, right? How much in the business? Because there are some agency owners who love being on sales calls, right? Who love being like an independent or individual contributor and doing the work. That's fine. You're the business owner. So if that's the life you want, cool, let's set it up. For example, I have one agency client right now that loves working a lot right now. He has extra free time. He's like, I'm going to front load all of this effort, get all of this in so that later I can, just kind of back off. But so with agency design, we're looking at what do we need to do now? What systems do we have to set up in order to, get the exact life that we want with our agency later? And so that all of these roadblocks now become speed bumps. And we might hit some stuff that we're like, oh, we got to rework this, but we're not completely shifting our model and struggling to figure out what the next step is. Mostly that comes down to what are we doing with our offer? And so because that offer feeds into all of the different areas of your business, and right from how are we delivering it? And so you're impacting your profitability, your efficiency. The team that you're building around you has to be good at that offer. It literally touches everything, right? Like even listeners should be able to comprehend that what you are doing.
But I want to pause there for a second, because
Sure.
if we're honest, I think a lot of agency owners don't realize how important the offer is. And I think that's why so much stuff ends up breaking down, and why I love what you're doing in the whole agency design space. Is it's like, it's got to start with that offer. It's got to start with who is your ideal client.
Yeah. So, and there's actually a couple, and like we can get into what the like dynamic agency OS kind of looks like a little later, but for like specifically for offers, kind of the primary work that I'm doing, this is essentially a go-to-market strategy, right? But specific to agencies or any service-based business. We want one audience, one service, one problem. If you can nail those down, it's really easy to make a good offer, and it's something that's easy to deliver, right, for your team. This is like simple math. Most agencies will work with multiple industries, right? So let's assume you got 10 clients, 10 different industries. Now, with those 10, you also have 7 different services that you're offering, right? Maybe it's, hey, we primarily do web design and stuff. We're also doing SEO, and we need ads to go to that. So you have all these things. Now, that's 10 times 7, right? So we're up to 70 different like nuanced variables that we have to play with here. Now, when we look at the problem that we actually solve, let's say we just have like 2 or 3 like different problems that we're solving. When we now multiply that, we're talking 140 or 210 different things that we need to keep track of, right? Variables. It is so much harder to become efficient and effective when you have to have your team trained up on all of these different like details.
Yep.
So if we can do one audience, one service, one problem, it's now way like we have one thing that we deliver. Hey, this is what we do. And when you have one thing, it's also much easier for people to refer you business because they know exactly what you do. It's much easier for the client to come in and say, hey, I have this exact problem. You're speaking my language. Let's do this. And everything is just set up for you. Your team, if you want to be an agency founder that gets out of sales, deliver one thing. Just then you can record your sales calls and say, this is how we sell this. But now imagine being the agency founder that has 210 different things that could go on here. You're never going to train someone else on that. And that's why so many agencies get stuck in that mode, and the agency founder can't get out of doing the business, like being in the weeds on everything and starting to create agency design that, that business that they actually want.
So, I mean, in your experience, because you've worked with many agencies now, and you yourself were you COO? Were you CEO? What was your role in that 3 million? You were both.
So when I came out of the Army, I started as a marketer with an agency. After about 9 months, I became the head of operations. Did that for a couple of years, and then became CEO.
Okay, yeah. So there's a degree of authority you have because you've been there. It's not like you got this idea about what would work best for agencies. You're like you've actually run a successful agency that got up to, you said, up to 3 million in revenue.
Yeah, just shy of 3. I mean, we did the whole Inc. 5000, right? Like 2 Common Club awards, all the fun stuff.
I love it. And so in being in that spot, I guess something I'm curious about. So between that and also the work that you've done with other agencies, I guess like when you're talking with these agency owners, like what is the main reason why there isn't a more clearly constructed offer, or their offer that they have is really kind of vague and ambiguous, just kind of a little cloudy? Why is that?
So I'm still trying to nail down the real reason, but I think it's because they're doing what everyone else is doing, right? Like it's really hard, especially if you're not a business person, right? If you're just there because you were good at web design, right? You're good at SEO. It doesn't mean you're business minded to be able to go in and know like, okay, what numbers do I have to look at to be able to make better decisions and all of these things. And so you look at, okay, well, what's an agency that I respect? What are they doing? And you don't know, like, I mean, there are multiple bigger agencies that I very much respect that had layoffs like over the past couple months, but no one else really knows that unless you know the people working there, right? You wouldn't have even known they had those layoffs. But so if I'm someone looking at what they're doing and just trying to emulate that, it's like, well, it's not working right now for them either. And so we have something that I've coined as service saturation, where it's like, you take SEO, right? I can get on Google and type in best SEO agency, and I'm going to find thousands and thousands of results for who is the best. And now if I'm an agent, like from a customer perspective, that sucks, right? Because I have to go sort through all of these and everyone is interchangeable. I'm going to completely base this off price. From the business perspective, it's like, well, the customer is going to base all of this on price. So now I'm inviting competition with everybody, and they're just looking, who can I pay the least in order to get this result? But then also it's like they're looking, oh man, I don't know. It's like they're just trying to emulate those services, right? To say, well, others are doing it, it must be working. When it's like, in reality, the more people who emulate, the less it works. And so,
well, and I like the point you're making, though, because I think essentially when you have this service saturation, what happens is whatever the service is that we're talking about, like you're talking about here, saying SEO, there's such a service saturation, it becomes a commodity. It's like there's like a sliding scale. You know, as long as something is highly complex and very low volume of supply, it's not a commodity at that point. It's a very unique custom experience. But the more it becomes standardized, the more you're emulating other people, the more you've essentially just kind of fallen in line. At that point, when it's a commodity, the real negotiation point is on price. And that's always going to be a losing battle for these smaller shops. You know, if you're a super large shop and you have the ability to effectively somewhat at scale, work with overseas talent or just like cheaper talent here in the United States, it might be fine to compete on price. But if you are a boutique, a smaller agency, I just don't think that's going to be, to your point, designing the right agency. I don't think that's going to be what's going to set you up for success.
Yeah, you're going to be miserable. Straight up, every agency owner I know that has followed that path is miserable. They're not making as much money as they want to be making. They're working more hours than they want to be making. Even if they are able to scale, they just keep asking, why is it getting harder as we're getting more clients? Right? Like, shouldn't it be easier now that we've had repetitions and we know how to do this stuff? And it's like, but it doesn't get easier if that's the approach you're taking. So
yeah. Totally. Okay, so I want to. We talked a little bit about offer. You also said it was one offer, one client. What was that?
One audience, one service, one problem, and that's what gives you your one offer.
Got it. Okay, so those are the one that gives you the offer. So let's dive into the one audience, because I think this is a challenge. Even the best marketing agencies out there who would say to the world, yes, you need to have a niche. You need to have a clarity on who your audience is. When I ask them, well, who's your audience? They're like, well, we serve B2B companies. And you're like,
yeah. It's like, oh, okay. That's narrow.
Right. I feel like that would be an example of not drinking your own Kool-Aid here. So talk to me a little bit about this. Like, if you can, just dive into, why is it that we're so concerned about narrowing down to that one audience? Like, what's the psychology behind this? Why do people not want to do that?
So I think most agencies are afraid to turn away revenue, right? I mean, that's generally what's going to happen. If someone comes to you and they're like, hey, can you do this? A lot of them say, yeah, I can do that. And then they have to figure out how to do that. And that's why you start stacking services, because you're like, well, we told these guys we know how to do ads. We might as well add it to our website, right? to say we can. And really that's it. A majority, 60. So WordStream did a study for, I think, last year, where like 60% of agency clients are coming from referrals, right? That's a 60%. Over half of your business is potentially coming from a source you have no control over, right? That's terrifying. Only 14% were for like direct digital marketing efforts. So it's like, okay, obviously, if you had a clear audience, and this kind of plays into the clear problem as well, you have the ability to do problem first messaging, which means I can put this in front of people and they can say, oh, that's me. He understands me, right? She understands me. And then we can actually get them to start talking to us, and we can have that conversation, and we can show them that, hey, we understand the nuances of what you're doing. Let's talk. And so when we're looking at like one audience, there's a bunch of different things that need to get included in here. Because like we want to create an awesome ICP. like document, something that's super clear. Most companies, period, I'm not even going to say just agencies, most companies, their ICP sucks. Like you, if you put 50% male or female, why is it on there? Why, like, is that going to influence how you are addressing people if it's irrelevant? Like, let's only look at the details that really matter in our marketing so that we can get super specific on how we're talking to these people. And with that, they often don't do a deep enough dive into where are these people and what's going on in their life so that we can get in front of them. And so, and one of the simplest exercises that I do with my clients is at the top of our ICP doc, we just put down who is your current, like, best client right now, like your best current client. Let's put them in, let's link up their, their LinkedIn profile, whatever, so that we can just analyze them. Like, what is it with them that meets our ICP? And I found that even some of the clients that we had built out in ICP, then when we go in and look at who's your favorite client, they don't match. And it's like, okay, well, so this is who you want to have, but you're also saying this person who has already given you money is great. What if we just got more of those? And so anyways, that's yeah, well, there you go. That's a pro tip for, like, just look at your current client and do a dream client too. Like, throw that in and just have the conversation with your team about how that works, what it looks like. But often I think there's also this, like, people look at the TAM and they're like, oh, I don't know. So one, total addressable market is not how much money you're going to make, right? If you hit everybody, if conservatively, you're going to hit a very, very small percentage of that. One of my clients really wanted to do nationwide SEO and stuff. So, like, well, I don't want to turn away revenue. I'm like, yeah, but you're in this city and you're already ranking number 1 for SEO agencies in this city. So why don't we do this? I pulled up Chamber of Commerce information. We looked at the 3 types of companies that he loves working with that were in there. We took those numbers and we took like 3%. If you were able to win 3% of these businesses, you could have a $6 million agency. Would you be happy with that? Like, hell yeah, I'd be happy with like a $6 million agency. It's like, we can do it with the foundation you have already set up. So, like, let's do that. And it just completely shifted how he was marketing on his website, some of the other things. And he's been stacking clients now. Like, it is so easy because people are referring him because they know exactly what he does.
So like, I want to talk about that in particular. And I'm glad you brought up the whole, like, TAM analysis, because I think this is just my own thoughts on this. I think sometimes we can be misled because of the influence that SaaS has had on our entrepreneurial economy here in the United States. Like, if we're honest, much of what we know to be quote unquote best practice comes from how SaaS entrepreneurship approaches things, right? Even just how you think about, like, raising funds and all, it's all based on SaaS. And so SaaS is very uniquely positioned to need a huge TAM, because that's how they can raise these big rounds. But I think when we're talking about agency TAM, we're talking about addressing your total market in the agency space. Like you were saying, people hesitate to niche down or to really focus on an audience because they're afraid of turning away revenue. But really, I mean, like, you gave a great example there. It's like, well, look, I mean, you could still become a $6 million agency even with this, much more focused niche. People think to themselves, well, I need to have this expansive TAM because I'm going to grow super large. And it's like, realistically, you're not, though. So if anything, it's way better for agencies to focus down and to be really specific on who their audience is.
Right. I get it. You get it. Hopefully everyone else starts to get it.
We agree on that. I think maybe some other, like, maybe caveats that would be helpful to bring in here is, I think you and I are talking about a very specific size of agency, right? So we're not talking, when we're given the advice that we're given right now, we're probably not talking to a $10 million agency when we're talking about the one to get the offer.
Yeah. So yeah, for a little clarity on that. So it's like, I firmly believe you cannot be an expert in everything, right? And so when you have a small team, you really need to pick, like, what is that one thing, that one service that we can anchor to that we are really good at? We're going to get all of these reps by working with our clients, because that is like a crazy advantage of agencies, where a brand gets to see a problem one time a month, right? Hey, we have to do this on our homepage. It's like, you can only run one test, because if you do a second one, it's going to interfere. You won't get, your results are inconclusive. But that agency can run tests across all of their clients this month. That's 10 tests maybe, right? That you get to run and learn from. And so you can rapidly learn things faster than anyone else. But if you try doing 20 different things, you're not going to learn. Like, you're still only getting to do one. So there's only so much time. So instead, you pick that one thing, get really good at it, hit those 10,000 hours very fast, and then move on. But so when as your agency gets bigger, rather than thinking, okay, what else do we need to take on? I like framing it as, what agencies could we develop within our agency to continue doing that, right? Because you can create pods, you can create there's other structures. So if that's your goal, we start setting it up early, and you can design an agency that is good at all of these different things. So if you're getting into email marketing, you don't need to ping the guys who are only good at web development, right? Like, let them be those experts, and they can say, hey, other team, like, we have a client for you, and they can, you hand it off, they can run that piece. And there's something of value to the clients who are doing this as well, right? Where they're like, oh, they have legit teams who are experts in these things. So I'm okay with you handing me off, because you guys are giving me this convenience to get these results, but you're also doing it in a way that's awesome. I'm going to get results. Most full service agencies don't have the size to be able to do that. And so the clients that are coming to them are doing it for convenience, right? They only want one person, one throat to choke when something goes wrong. And so they're doing that, and they're willing to sacrifice some of the results for convenience. Even if they don't say it outright, I think that's it. Now, there are some full service agencies that just outsource and stuff to find other experts outside. That's awesome. That's great. As what, I would rather do that than try to do it all in-house. But for the most part, you're targeting a different dream outcome for that client. So
I think it's a really good point, though, to make, because I have heard this concept, even in the software development world, of pods being very popular now. And so what I'm hearing you say is yes, somebody's going to listen to this and they're going to say, yeah, but the whole 1-1-1, that doesn't really work when you are a super large agency. And the point I'm hearing you say is, no, it can still work. The way that you apply that is you then say, okay, but you have just one very clear offer for this pod and one very clear offer for this pod. And so you structure yourself in such a way where you're almost like an agency of agencies. Is that right?
Right. Yep.
Okay. It
sounds simple. It's not easy to do. Right. You got to be able to grow to that size.
That's right. That's right. But you're not going to be able to grow. You're not going to grow sustainably and consistently without first applying that when you're earlier on. I guess the other end of the spectrum would be for the really small agencies out there, because I can also hear something that's going through maybe their minds, or other people who are listening to this and be like, hold on a second, this is not great advice, is the whole idea of well, you should turn away the revenue if it doesn't fit your ICP. There's probably a point at which you're so small that you probably should just say yes to what you can say yes to. Do you have a sense for when that switch flips? At what point?
Yeah, it's individualized, but there is definitely, when you're just starting out, I would say yes to a lot of revenue. To whatever gets your foot in the door, to start figuring out what is it that we are good at, right? Unless you're doing projects, you're not going to know where your specialties are. And so, especially when you're smaller, right? Every client that comes in is another data point to be able to start create, to make decisions later on, what do we actually want to do with this business? Who do we want to serve? And stuff with it, you're also figuring out your team, right? You're able to see their strengths and weaknesses with every client that comes in. And so you just keep getting more and more refined on well, these are the exact clients that we get the best results for. Let's go work with these people. Right. Cause there are a couple other pieces with the audience thing. It's yeah, we want the growing TAM. They need money was one. That's just straight up. We don't even need to spend a ton of time there, because that should be obvious. Although I see some agencies targeting people who it's you don't need to target someone who owns a personal podcast, right? Selling them clips, a $3,000 package for clips. Most podcasts don't make money. Yeah. So don't bother. Most business podcasts don't make money. Right. So yeah, don't bother. Anyways, so they need money. They also should be someone you enjoy working with. Because if you're doing this right, at some point you're going to be going to conferences, you're going to be speaking on stage, you're going to be in meetings with them, right? Just for regular client work. If you loathe these people and just hate dealing with them, your life is going to suck. So let's just forget forget the people we don't want to work with. Let's just focus on like, hey, I actually enjoy helping these people. They are fun to work with. I love their problems. Like, let me lean into that. And then they should also be easy to find, right? So like at the start, if you're only taking on clients who are coming to you because referrals, stuff like that, it's like, it's great. It's a great source. But like, if you can't go find them yourself and know where they are, it's gonna be really hard to market to them. And there are some like, and the joke I like, man, if you have to go to like some basement and like knock on a door, give a secret password, and then they open it up and there's a bunch of like hooded people who are like, oh, hey, there you are. And it's like, now we can talk business. It's like, no, we don't want that. Like there's so many things that have to go right. And that's kind of weird. But like, we want to be able to just know, hey, I can put this out here and there's someone who is going to see this that could potentially buy from me.
Yeah. Well, and maybe on that note, if I can share my own anecdotal experience with that,
it's
when I'm going to do what I want. No, but when I was first starting off, truth be told, I wasn't even thinking agencies. What I had in my mind is I thought to myself, I would love to work with people who are intentional about their growth, but they're not going to like rip the paint off the walls. There's some, VC-backed founders that they're just like, they eat, live, and breathe. They just do this all the time. I'm like, that does not jive at all with what I'm trying to build in my business. So I had a very specific type of person. We might call them maybe like a lifestyle entrepreneur or something like a little bit beyond lifestyle entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So I had in my mind what that person looked like. If I left my ICP at that point, to your point, it would be really hard to find that person, because it's like, where exactly, what kind of businesses do they actually run? Right. And so I think it's a good point, which is, even if you have a good idea about what this person is kind of like, their general demographic, it is still important that you put them in some type of box that is easily identifiable, whether it's on LinkedIn or if it's on Google, it's, wherever they are, you need to be able to find them, because you need to be able to, I'm assuming you need to be able to reach out to them. Is that the main reason for that?
So, I mean, reaching out is possible. It depends on your specific like strategy reaching out, but like really you just want to be able to put something in front of them at a minimum, right? If you can, LinkedIn, right? Like I get okay engagement on my posts, but everyone who has hired me has gone through all of my LinkedIn content before hiring me. And they've told me this on Sales Call, like, I read all your content. I love it. Like, that's why we're talking. And it's like, so just putting it out there on LinkedIn, even if I don't like the platform or I have any other issues, it's like, it's where my audience is. So if I can keep putting stuff out there, they will see it. And it happens to be a platform that I can reach out. I'm not a fan of just personally of doing outbound, but
yeah, you don't like just spamming people with like, hey, here's who I am and here's what I have to offer.
Yeah, it's even the ones who have like engaged with me in some way. Like if for some reason I just don't enjoy being like, hey, thanks for commenting on my LinkedIn post. Like let's go talk. But it works. Like there's proof that it works. So I'm not saying it's not. It's just personally I just don't enjoy doing it, and so I'll keep doing the inbound approach. And
I like it. With I want to go back to one other thing you had said, just to kind of round out the whole. It's I'm blanking on the first one. I know it's one audience and one problem, but what's the first one?
One service.
That's right. And that right there constitutes one offer. But the last piece, the one problem, you had said something earlier. You said that, if you don't nail the audience, you can't then nail the problem.
Yeah.
Expand on that.
Yeah. So so when a lot of people look at audiences, they'll talk like vertical or horizontal positioning, right? So verticals, we have the different industries. Horizontal, we have different like job functions and like within that and stuff, right? So like I can help HR representatives. Now, when we go into the problem, the reason that we really want to nail that audience is because different audiences view the problem differently. And so I can go work with, like, I could have the solution for HR like reps, but HR in a tech company is going to look very different than HR in a manufacturing company. And so when I need to now have like the intersection of the vertical with the horizontal, so I know exactly who I am talking to, because that becomes the lens through which we view the problem. And so when we get into like problem first messaging, I can use the language that you would be using to talk about it. And now you're more likely to actually engage with like what I'm saying, and it's going to resonate with you because I'm not bringing up all of these other things that are irrelevant to your agency.
Totally. Well, and if I can take that a step further, I'm just even thinking about some examples. Let's just say the example company, sample agency is a web development company.
Yep.
Let's say they have chosen not to embrace a very targeted ICP, targeted audience. When they go to then post, whether it's on LinkedIn or they're making YouTube content or blog posts, whatever these things are, they're creating content to talk to what the problem is. A lot of times you get a very generic exposition of the problem, like your website needs updating, versus like, I don't know, if you had a real clear understanding of like, oh, we're trying to reach, the horizontal niche, we're trying to reach the CMOs of higher level education. You can have a much more articulated, picture of the problem that's probably going to resonate a lot more with those CMOs than if you were to just say, oh, we help build websites for people.
Exactly. There's also, even within the same space, right? Problems change and they morph. So like you could be someone who helps agencies with lead generation. That's going to look very different between a 500K MR or ARR agency and a 500K MRR. I don't know any of those agencies, but like right when you start hitting that 3 million mark, it's like your lead gen sort of like you have some capital. Hopefully, if you're doing your business right, like you should have some capital you can throw at the problem and try to resolve it. Versus at 500K, like you might not. You are figuring it out for yourself because you are the one who's going to do it. And so, yeah, that's just another lens or another reason, I guess, why you need to nail that audience down.
I love it. Well, again, it's the reason why I said at the very beginning of the show, I love what you're doing, because I think what I've seen in my experience as a fractional CFO is 99 times out of 100, or like 101 times out of 100, the reason why things are struggling in the agency is because there's just not that clear offer. The offer is not there. The positioning is not well defined. The ICP doesn't exist for them. And so then all these things happen downstream. Like I can talk to the numbers. I can, speak to why gross margins need to be higher than they currently are till I'm blue in the face, but it doesn't ultimately change the problem at the core, which is that there's just not a solid offer and positioning. So that's why I love what you're doing. You don't just do that though, right? Because you were talking about, it's about agency design. And so there's something more comprehensive to your approach. Can you talk us through at a high level, like what is your overall approach?
So when I decided this was the path I was going to take, like working with agencies, I sat down and asked like, well, what is the path to create like the ideal agency? And so I came up with Dynamic Agency OS, which I named the business after. Hey, look at that. But the idea was that I don't want something that's only true if you work with me. I want like a system that if anyone followed this, no matter who you're working with, no matter how you're doing it, if you just solve for like these problems at different steps, you can have the agency that you want. And so with that, and this is really because I know personally, I do not have all the answers. This is why I love parent. It's how you and I met, right? It's how I've met tons of other experts in different areas, because I can pull people in to help get these problems solved. And that is more satisfying to me, to be like, okay, we just helped this agency, like kill it. They've got all of their problems. They're set now. We're good. But so as I was looking at this, I realized that a lot of agencies do start with like the operations. Like, how do I set up my systems to make sure that we're good and I can spend more time doing these things? It's like, really, you should be spending the initial time starting with your operators, the team. And so I broke this up with operators, offers, then operations. And so the very first thing you do is look at your team and assess them. Like, do they have the skills to be able to deliver our current offer? Now, if you're just starting out as an agency, you get to choose what are the skills I need, what that I want. Most people who are listening to this already have an agency. So now it's more retroactively, go back and look, like, do you have the actual skills to deliver your offer at a high level? And so you do that analysis, then you look at your roles. Like, does the team, or do I have everyone in the team in the right positions to be able to do these things? And then finally, you start planning their growth, right? So that they have a path for their own growth, but you have a path for business growth. Then we look at the offers, and we do kind of everything that we just talked about with the like setting yourself up with your go-to-market strategy. We're defining the problem. We are differentiating our solution, and then designing an offer. Work through those. And then once we have that offer, only then can we get a great result for our clients, because we have the team capable of delivering. We have the offer that we want to deliver. Now let's look at like turning those into processes, right? Whenever you start your process out and you don't have a great outcome, like that's what's going to get replicated, right? Like people are just going to keep doing this mediocre like output. And so instead, let's really get like what done looks like at the perfect level. Then let's turn it into process. Then let's start automating everything in order to be able to do that faster and go from there. And so, yeah, that's the path.
So I want to, so that's interesting. So I know there's like kind of those three kind of major hurdles or whatever to kind of work through. So you said it was operators, offers, and then you said outcomes was the last? Operations. Got it. So I want to, if I can play some devil's advocate for a minute.
Hit me.
So I hear what you're saying, kind of like you need to know the who, right? And that's where you're talking about the operators. Like, do we have the right people? Are they well tailored for our current situation? I wonder if we have a chicken and egg situation though, right? Because how do we know who we need if we don't have a clearly defined, if we haven't really done the hard work around offer?
Yeah. So normally I am working with agencies who have already tried stuff. They have some data that we get to go back and look at and decide from there. I would say even at the like individual solopreneur level, you could, like when we assess the team, the founder is included in that, right? Like because you're contributing. So like what skills do you have? It's what the agency is normally built on anyways. And so we look at the founder and say, you know, what skills do you have? What are you good at? What do you enjoy doing? What are these things that like, where can you provide the most impact? What have you been profitable in doing before? And that kind of feeds into like one service piece. And then we take that and now it's like, okay, well, if we had to get really good at this, let's look at like what skills would we actually need to shore up any of these gaps, right? What are the things that we have to do in order to become the agency that we want to? Maybe it's bringing in other people, right? At this point, maybe it's not. Actually, I just sent out one of my newsletters. We talked about the path to hiring with just a more, better, new kind of path, right? So should I right now, you ask this every time you're going to do a hire. Are we hiring someone because we need more of what we're currently doing to increase capacity? Because we need to be able to do it better, which you should only do once you have enough data points to know what to improve. Or should we be doing something new, like completely different, like we're adding some functionality to help with this outcome, or maybe it is a completely different service that we have to start venturing into because it's what's necessary right now. And so you start looking through that lens of, is it more, better, or new? And then that gives you an idea of who you should actually be bringing in at that point. I think that answered the chicken or egg.
I think so.
It is.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, but I imagine like even in your experience too, there's probably a little bit of an iterative approach that you have to take, where it's like we do an initial take on our operators, and then as we go through our offer, we might need to then revisit like, okay, now that we've clarified this and we have a lot more specificity, we might need to come back to operators and realize, oh, now that we're, maybe potentially removing some of these service offerings, that might make some people redundant on our team, or we might need to retool and tailor like where they're set up. Have you seen experiences like that?
Yeah, we've definitely gone back and relooked at things. And sometimes it even comes down to like, hey, these team members don't actually have something to offer for what we need. And we take a very good, like my recommendation is always to separate by finding them another position. Because when someone leaves your company, right, no matter when someone leaves your team, period, it sends a message to everyone who stays back. And so like you want to make sure that it's something that actually builds trust and like confidence in your abilities as a leader.
That's huge.
And so, yeah, like that's been a case before.
And so I guess like with that, I loved what you were talking about on the operator side. We were talking about like making those hiring decisions. You said more, better, or what was the third one? More, better, or new. Yeah. I mean, like as we're coming into 2025, I know that this episode is going to air already in 2025. But like when we're recording this is, beginning of November. I'd love to get your take on, as we're in 2025. Yeah, what are some things that agency owners should be thinking about on that new category? Like what goes into the decision on whether or not we need to hire a new person versus just bringing on a contractor?
So anytime you can do something in-house without sacrificing quality, it's usually a better bet, right? You have more control over what you're doing. You're able to tailor it accordingly. It's good. Outsourcing is fine, right? Because you're usually it's arbitrage of labor, right? You're gonna buy low, sell high, good to go. But you don't have as much control over it. Even if it's a white label service, client never knows they even exist. It's just like meh. But so as we're going into 2025, it's like things. Let's take this year as an example. Like AI comes out, and now this is a new type of offering that could really help us with whatever we're doing. And so bringing on someone who's an expert in AI to say, hey, we're doing this for SEO, for web design. I need someone who can start to facilitate this as like into what we're doing so that the rest of the team can now benefit from having all these, right? Because the more is just going to keep doing, like we're finding someone who already has the skills. We know exactly what they need. We're just going to keep doing this. Better is continuously looking at improving it, but not in a, actually the web shop people will like this concept. It's another 3-parter for a framework where anytime we want to make a lift on something, like we actually want to improve it, we can optimize, iterate, or pivot. A pivot is like a 50% lift, right? We need to actually shift like it. So if we're looking at like a landing page, it's not working and we need more than 50%, we can burn it down, start over. It's okay. We iterate anything with like, I don't know, 25 to 50%. And that's where it's like we can run multiple tests because we know something's not working, but we have some proof that it is. And so we just need to figure out what are those things that we can do here to fix this. Then optimizing, it's like, well, things are actually looking pretty good. So we only want to do like one little tweaks, right? Because at some point we actually run into the hazard of if we change something, it breaks it. And so when you're looking at bringing in a new hire, I run it through the same model. Okay, well, what we're looking at here, right? If we're coming in to help us with content or to help us with landing pages, right? Landing page design, you need to help us get this better. Are we optimizing, iterating, or pivoting in order to make this better? Usually, if you're bringing in a new hire, you've already done more. By having more, it means you have more data points to know like what is working and what to do. So you're usually in the optimize or iterate kind of phase. That's all they're focused on. How do I improve your processes to make everyone here more effective? It's often like an operations hire, maybe like even a project manager, like someone who can come in and just help the systems of that. Then, that new hire is looking at what can I come in and completely revolutionize? Not necessarily pivot, right? We're still getting that outcome, but it's like, how can I become a force multiplier to take this to like the next level? And so, as you're going into 2025, I don't know what those things are going to look like right now. But that's the framework that I would use to approach it.
Well, and so I even like how you're talking about the pivot, iterate, optimize, and even just thinking about changes in terms of like, what's the lift going to be? Because I think sometimes, I mean, if we're honest, many of us entrepreneurs, we tend to be inherently optimistic. Like that's why we're entrepreneurs, right? Like we have a hope that things are going to be, better, easier than they actually are. So as a result, we tend to bite off maybe more than we can chew. So I'm curious, like when you're advising your clients, as you're going through some of these assessments on whether it is offering new service or making some of these changes, or even thinking about those operators, whether we need to bring somebody net new in, do you ever advise them maybe away from doing too many big changes, or like do you help them assess like, okay, you've got 3 pivotal changes that you're proposing, maybe we choose only one? Like how do you navigate those kind of conversations?
So man, there's a bunch of different ways to take this and like different approaches. I have like my own decision-making frameworks that I like using internally. I also have there's a difference between mental models, which everyone's super familiar with, and then tangible models. And a tangible model, you can approach this like a math formula, right? If I have these inputs, I'll get this output. And so let's say we're talking overwhelm. Overwhelm is a combination of high demands and a lack of clarity. And so like I had this one running an agency where team members would come in and say, like, I'm feeling really overwhelmed with my workload. I don't know what to do. And so I'd say, all right, are the demands too high? Like, do you feel like you actually can't get everything done on your plate? They're like, well, no, I can see like how many hours we've estimated. Like, I know I can do that piece. I'm like, okay, so there's a lack of clarity. So like, let's look at, how do we prioritize? How do we do these things? And they've left there after like 10 minutes and they're like, awesome, I've got it. I understand. Right. So it's another model that like, yeah, we can't put actual numbers in there, but through using that, we're able to make decisions much better because it just gives us a framing to be able to work with. And mental models also super useful, but they're just a little more like out there. Like you have to kind of understand system thinking, right? And like all of these different things. And so that's one approach. I would also just look at how much data can we actually like produce in order to be able to make a sound decision. So if we're saying, hey, we want to change all three of these things, it's like, what information do we have right now that we can look at that would say making those three is a good idea? Or is there one, right? Anytime you can focus on a single thing at a given time, you're going to have a better output because it's getting all of your attention. And so, but similar, there might actually be a time where we have to make like the timing is now. These opportunities need to be now. So we also look at it with type 1, type 2 decisions. Jeff Bezos created this concept back in the shareholder letter where a type 1 decision, just imagine it like a one-way door, right? When we make this decision, there is no going back. So we have to be super clear that this is the way versus type 2, where it's like, no, we can, if we make it, it's no big deal. Let's just come back, like erase that mistake. We learn from it and we're good. So when you can quickly identify what's a type 1 and type 2 decision, you can quickly make decisions if it's a type 2. You can say it doesn't, like, let's just go, right? Like, let's make these decisions fast so that we can figure it out. There's also a concept that I've kind of played with this dynamic decision-making model that I've been working with called the speed to informed. Most agencies run into problems because they wait too long to make a decision. And so, and that's normal. That's a lot of people do that. Right. But by waiting too long, you're now putting yourself in a reactive mode because a lot of the opportunities you had before go away.
That's right.
And so with speed to informed, we're asking how fast can I acquire all of the information that I need in order to be able to make a decision? Colonel Colin Powell, or General Colin Powell. Wow. I'm sorry. Anyway, he had a concept called the 40-70 rule. And it was this idea that like you shouldn't make a decision before having 40% of the information you need. And you shouldn't wait to have more than 70 before making a decision. It is better to be within the 40-70 range to make a decision because what you would gain in information for being over 70, you're going to lose like efficiency and just being able to take action now. But then by moving too quick, you're not good. So I either see agency owners on either ends of this where they're waiting too long, so they're hesitant, they're like, well, let's see how things pan out, or they're so tied into change, like they're so comfortable with change that they're just like, oh, let's just do this, let's do that. And then it's like, well, hang on, let's look at the speed to informed. What does like our dream outcome look like? What data do we need for that to become true, right? Like what do we need to see in order to know this would be the right decision? And then how fast can we acquire that information? And when you start thinking that way, you start building systems within your agency to make sure you have the right dashboards, you have the right information, right? You're using like something we did in ClickUp. I made sure that I could just open this one report and see everything I needed to know exactly like our capacity, how we could do certain things. So when a client was potentially coming on and maybe they were like, hey, we actually want to go at this higher tier, right, for more workload, I could just open this up and be like, yeah, I can take them on right now without killing my team. And so it's like, how can you increase your speed to inform continuously? And it really comes down to tracking as much as you can. But that sucks. Nobody wants to track everything, right? Like, especially when you get into like time tracking and people are like, oh, you're micromanaging me. It's like, yes, a little bit, because we need to see this. Like, it will help make your life better in the long run.
Yeah.
I promise.
That's so good. Okay, so you covered a lot of really
that was
good
a rant.
Things. No, but that was so good. I mean, this just is evidence as to why you know what you're talking about, especially, and this is probably partially your military background coming out, but also just your experience being an operator in an agency space. You clearly you've thought through a lot of these things. I want to go back for a minute to the type 1, type 2, because I thought that was a really helpful distinction. And I even see this play out in my own life. Would you mind sharing with us, again, for listeners, the type 1 decision is if we do this, we can't go back. And then type 2 is we could absolutely go back if we needed to. So could you give us an example of like what would be a type 1 and a type 2 in your own experience in agency world?
Ooh, that's hard. So, okay, so it could be a decision like when I was moved into my CEO role at the agency, like for the company founder, that was a type 1 decision, right? Like it is not something you can easily go back on. Like it might pan out. Like, I mean, it did pan out. I left the company eventually, like after a couple of years, but like in the moment, it's like, it's not, if I make him the CEO, that moves a lot of different things around this company. Our clients know there's a new CEO. Our like everyone outside is seeing these things happen, right? That's not something you can just flip. Oh, just kidding, guys. Like we're going back to this, like, because then people lose confidence in you. Like they'd be like, whoa, you made a huge decision like that and just turned around on it immediately. And so, yeah, I guess
that'll be a type 1,
right? So like a big hiring decision could be one. So like, yeah, but type 2 could be, hey, do we take this client on, try them out, and like if it doesn't work out, cool. Like it could be something that simple.
It could be, more simple stuff. Okay, that's helpful. And then another thing you kind of addressed on a number of occasions throughout this whole interview, you've been talking a lot about data. Now, I know that you guys were in ClickUp for your agency, and so. And obviously being the financial person I am, I have a lot of financial data at my disposal. Would you mind sharing, like, what are some of those data points that you are typically dealing with or you're advising your clients to be honed in on to make better informed decisions? What are the key data points that you're typically going after?
A lot of them do come down to like financial pieces, but also like efficiency type stuff, right? So we can figure out our AGI, our billable hours, all of those types of things, our delivery costs, all of that gets factored in. Because you're a business, most of your decisions can be made off those, because the whole goal of the business is to stay in business so that you can keep growing, keep hiring these people, right? Take care of everyone. And so, there's not a lot like customer satisfaction, NPS scores is something that we often look at internally, our operational load. And NPS as far as the client, but also internally, your employee NPS score is pretty big. Something we had done at the agency, which the company founder had been doing this before I got there. We had a Friday Mojo score, and it was just put a score 1 to 10, then leave a comment about how your week went. And it makes it very easy to now see how your team is feeling about things. So you can check in with them. Like you don't always have time to check in with everybody. Right. But if you see someone's been like trending down on this Mojo score, you can just go and pop in and be like, hey, I saw these, anything that I can do to help you out? Like, can I lighten your load? Can you need a day off? Right. You can just go with that. Operational load, there's a lot like time tracking, just to look at like where are our efficiencies, where are our inefficiencies. The more data you can collect, the better. Yeah. And it's just figuring out like, what are those pieces for you? Leads, right? Like all the standard like marketing stuff, marketing and sales. What is something that I wish more agencies would track would just be their close rates, their actual close rate. Don't say like, well, I think I closed about half of them. It's like, no. Let's go look at the actual deals. And over this month, what was your close rate? Because very frequently a agency owner will either have a very strong marketing background or a very strong sales background. And the ones that have a good sales background they'll do awesome on the sales, but they usually don't give as much attention to the marketing side. And so they don't have a ton of leads coming in. A lot of it, like they can close every referral that hits their doorstep, right? But they can't really bring them in themselves. Versus the opposite, where, hey, I'm really good at marketing and I can get this offer in front of people. They're interested, but then when we go into the sales conversations, it just kind of falls flat. And so something I've started looking at with all my clients is sales velocity. And we do it as a snapshot in time. Let's look over a given week. How many leads did we have, right? What was our average deal size and when I say leads, it's like opportunities. We're not talking like unqualified. It's like, we want people who are actually in conversation with us. What was our average deal size for these deals? What was our average close rate? And then we're going to divide multiply those, divide it over the length of the sales cycle. And by doing that, we get a nice little snapshot of our sales velocity, which is the rate at which we make money. If you're looking at this, like those numbers, it is important to know this, not how much money you have made, it's the rate at which you are making money over a given period of time, right? So it's like looking at miles per hour, not miles. And so we can look at that and we can say, like, I'll point out, like, hey, we're short on leads right now. Like, you're doing great on the sales stuff. Let's focus, like, what are some things we could be doing this week to get more leads in the door? So that next week when we look at this, hopefully we have tons of leads coming in. We have maintained everything else. And so now our sales velocity goes up. So the speed at which we are making money is even, it's faster.
So this is a kind of a dumb question, but and I'm still getting more and more familiar with some of the sales and like revenue metrics. Mm-hmm. But when you talk about sales velocity, help me understand how does marketing play into your sales velocity?
How many leads can I fill the pipeline with? So that's it. And there's like another step in there, because there is a difference between, MQLs, SQLs opportunities.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't matter if I can bring in 1,000 leads, if only 2 of them are good for conversation because they fit our ICP, doesn't really matter. Mm-hmm. And so there's like a marketing velocity side. How fast can I take someone from, like, they don't know us, maybe they're a visitor on our website, to being in conversation with us. Mm. And then there's all these different approaches we can take, which one of the ones that is enjoyable if we're talking data is look at time on brand. You're using YouTube, LinkedIn, your blog, podcasts, right? You have all these different resources. Mm. If you can find ways to figure out how many of those assets each does someone need to consume before they become an MQL, I guess, or an opportunity. Now we can set our time on brand for whatever that time frame is. So we can say, hey, they watched 3 YouTube videos, a podcast, 2 blog posts, right? We tally all of those up by how much time that was. And so now I can literally say, well, if they consume 4 hours of our content, there's a good chance that they will go in, they will want a conversation with us. And so you can start breaking those down. Well, that could be 20 blog posts. It could be 10 YouTube videos. Like, where are we seeing the best results? How do we do that? And the goal is to continuously shrink that time frame. And so you start getting into like other people, right? Doing a longer YouTube video isn't going to be the solution. Doing a shorter YouTube video where you pack more value is the solution. And so that's what's going to get, like, how can I take the same things I'm delivering over 45 minutes and bring it to 30 and then to 15? And if we can get that asset in someone's hands, now we're dangerous, right?
Well, and that's just another example though of where having even more specific data, like you're talking about, like, how many videos that they are going to watch before they make a decision. Like, all of this, I guess, just speaks to kind of the overarching theme of like having really good data to make these decisions, and guiding and directing your agency is so huge. I do think a lot of times, especially, maybe more creatives are going to look to the collection of some of that data as being just a drag. I mean, the great example of that is time tracking, right? Like, nobody loves time tracking. Everybody hates time tracking, but it's an example but it's a way for us to collect data, and that data is very informative and should be helping us and informing our strategy for how we're going to be doing things going forward.
Right. And I think for the teams that are hesitant and they don't enjoy like having to track their time, explaining how it benefits them is usually enough. Like, check it out. Do you want to work 50 hours a week? Because I don't want you to. Like, I want you to work your 40 or whatever we've promised, right? And cap out. But if I don't know how much time it's taking you on each task, I might oversell us or undersell us. And now we don't have enough clients coming in where I can't pay you. So like, I need this information to be able to make sure I'm not making you miserable and I'm helping you pay your bills, right? Like it's super easy when you frame it like that. And yeah, we might not need to go as granular as to have like every minute of every specific task tracked, which is, I think, something that everyone automatically assumes, like, well, they're going to look at every detail. But like, just having that information does enable us to make better decisions that actually benefit everyone.
Yeah, that's totally right. Well, Chris, I know we're fast approaching our hour mark here. We've covered a lot of ground. This has been really, really good. I'm wondering if there's one thing, as we kind of round out our time, if there's one thing, speaking to the dynamic agency OS as a whole, maybe one major piece of advice. We're talking to an agency who maybe has never really implemented a system like what you're talking about here. What is like the baby step that you would recommend for them to go from where they are today to maybe one step closer to a more comprehensive strategic approach to agency design?
Yeah. So let's see if I can tie a bunch of the stuff we talked about in this one thing. I would start by just, what do you want, right? Like nail down your goal. And there's so many paths you can take for this, like do your 5-year, 3-year, like 10-year, whatever. Figure out what your long-term vision is. Also figure out what your short-term vision is. Like, what do you want right now? Because even like people are not good at delayed gratification, right? It's simple. If you're miserable every day, but you're just like, oh, I'm grinding for that one thing, like it's not going to be like enjoyable to like, you're going to hit retirement and be like, man, I just wasted 20 plus years doing these things, trying to grow this agency. So instead, what do you need right now to be happy and to be able to continue doing everything you're doing? Write that down, and then also write down that big goal. Okay, we want to make sure they're nested. So like if the things that make you happy right now will never get you to your bigger goal, then you probably have a problem you should work at. But like do that, and then just ask, who can help me achieve? Knowing, right, if I know where I am and where I need to go, then it's just connect, like creating a bridge. And so like you can literally map out the steps to get there. So who do I need to talk to or to bring in, to hire? What skills do I need to acquire, right? Like what needs to happen in order for me to do that? Usually it's going to be people, just having conversations with people. Go talk to them. I'm a firm believer that Solomon's paradox is real. Like we can't solve our own problems. We need someone else. That's why LeBron James doesn't just have like his head coach, right? He's got an athletic trainer. He's got a massage therapist. He's got a dietitian. He has a water boy. He had like all of these things to help him be who he is. I'm not even a basketball fan, but I know that's how it works.
Yeah.
And so when you can start thinking about it like that and bringing it like, who do I need around me to surround myself with in order to be that level of successful? Like it starts becoming a lot easier.
I love that. I love that. Well, Chris, thank you so much for giving us some insight, some ideas about developing and designing the agency that you want. And I'm assuming that as our listeners have heard about this, there's maybe been a couple ideas that have been sparked from this conversation. If they are in a spot where they've heard this and they're like, yeah, I'd be interested to just have a conversation more with Chris, or like we talked about before with content, they'd be interested in just kind of like consuming more of what you've already put out there. Where's the best place for people to go next if they wanted to get in touch with you or watch some more of your content?
Sure. So open 2 tabs. One of them, go to dynamicagencyos.com. You can connect with me like on that page if you want to chat, but I have links to all of the different places where I'm publishing content. So you can find it all right there. Substack, podcast, all different places. And yeah, that's probably good. The other one, just LinkedIn, standard LinkedIn, Christopher R. DuBois, your little browser. But we will be continuously posting. Like we got all these live events. You joined us for last one. The All In Agency Summit's a big one. I'm continuously figuring out like what's the next big event that we can do that's just free, and I can put it in front of agency owners to connect them with experts and help give them the most value. So at a minimum, you should be able to find some sweet free events that I'm lining up for you.
Yeah. And I would even say if people are listening and following me as well, I will most likely be part of some of these free events or at least advertising for some of them as well. So feel free to take a look at my profile as well. But Chris, thank you so much for taking the time today. I really appreciate all of your insights.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. This was a fun conversation.
And thank you to our listeners. If you found value in our episode today, please leave us a review and tell your friends about us. If you're interested in being a guest on our show, as a digital agency owner, or maybe somebody with insights that can help digital agencies grow, head over to our website to learn more at acquip.com/podcast guest. That's ACCQUIP.com/podcast guest.